That was literally the first thing I heard that day. Regina Caldwell's voice slicing across my front field like a cheap police siren, followed by the metallic snap of steel giving way. And when I stepped out onto my farmhouse porch, coffee still in my hand, there they were. 3 white trucks lined up across my driveway with Oak Hollow HOA Patrol slapped on the doors in big vinyl letters. Neon vest warriors piling out like they'd just kicked down the gates of a cartel compound. Dust swirled in the noon heat. Phones were already up and recording. Clipboards were out like weapons. And at the front of that little army stood Regina, red in the face, lipstick too bright for a Sunday, one manicured finger stabbing the air in my direction as she announced, "This property is now under official Oak Hollow Reserve safety inspection." I didn't move, didn't rush, just leaned on the railing, took a slow sip, and said, "You sure you're in the right jurisdiction, Regina?" Because about 50 feet behind me, on the other side of my barn wall, Sheriff Daniel Grant, the actual law in this county, was sitting at my kitchen table, boots off, hat on the chair, quietly working through a stack of paperwork and sipping the coffee I'd brewed him not 20 minutes earlier, completely unaware that a suburban cosplay SWAT team was cutting their way onto his temporary base of operations. I'd bought this land 15 years earlier, 20 acres of unincorporated county ground just outside the perfectly edged, HOA-controlled neighborhood of Oak Hollow Reserve, the kind of place where every mailbox matched and every front door looked like it came from the same catalog page. My place was different. One old farmhouse, one red barn, corn in the back, horses in the pasture, a gravel drive, and a rusty windmill creaking in the breeze, and more importantly, 0 dues, 0 meetings, 0 people telling me what shade of beige my life was supposed to be. Then Regina Caldwell moved in. You know the type: blazer in July, clipboard in August, power trip all year round. Within 6 months of buying her house, she'd reluctantly accepted the role of president of the Oak Hollow Reserve Homeowners Association, and from the first time she marched up to my fence to complain that the smell from your horses is impacting the community experience, I knew she'd decided my farm was her personal boss battle. I told her as politely as I could, "Ma'am, that smell is called a working ranch," and watched her face tighten like I'd just insulted the Constitution. From there, the letters started. Envelopes with the Oak Hollow HOA logo appeared in my mailbox like junk mail from hell. Made-up fines for visual disruption, accusations of unapproved livestock, demands that I repaint my barn to match community earth tones. She even sent one notice claiming my locked front gate violated shared access expectations, which was impressive considering my land was never part of Oak Hollow Reserve in the first place. One phone call to the county clerk confirmed what I already knew. My property had been zoned agricultural longer than Oak Hollow Reserve had existed, and the HOA's legal authority ended exactly at my fence line. I could have built a neon purple chicken church if I wanted, and they still couldn't touch me. But Regina didn't hear no. She heard challenge accepted. She started showing up with a little entourage, her husband Harold Caldwell, a retired security guard named Rick Morales, and a community volunteer called Toby Price, all wearing reflective vests and cheap radios, calling themselves the Oak Hollow Compliance Patrol like that meant something in county law. They tried to inspect my fence, my tractors, even the gravel on my driveway, and when I told them, calmly, that the next time they stepped onto my side of the boundary, I'd call the sheriff, they laughed. So I called the sheriff. Sheriff Daniel Grant, who I'd gone to high school with, rolled up in his county cruiser, took one slow walk around the property line, listened to Regina rant about community harmony, then handed her paperwork back and said, "Ma'am, this isn't worth the toner you printed it with," before advising her, very clearly, to stay off my land. From that day on, in Regina's mind, it wasn't just me versus the HOA. It was me and Sheriff Grant versus her entire cardboard kingdom. Weeks went by. I thought maybe she'd run out of steam. Instead, the rumors started. She told anyone who'd listen that I was running an illegal salvage yard, storing dangerous equipment, maybe even growing something I wouldn't want law enforcement to see behind my barn. Some neighbors believed her, others rolled their eyes, but she collected a loyal little fan club of people who loved feeling important as long as they had a vest and a reason to stare over a fence. Then Sheriff Grant called. He needed a quiet place for a weekend, he said, somewhere out of the way while he worked a small investigation into stolen construction equipment and, as he put it, some suspicious money flowing through a certain HOA's accounts. He didn't name Oak Hollow HOA, but when his unmarked SUV rolled up and parked behind my barn, and he set up in my guest room with a stack of files and his laptop, I had a feeling we were on the same page. That same afternoon, I saw Regina's SUV creeping past, phone held up as she filmed my gate, my driveway, and that unmarked county vehicle like she'd just uncovered a smuggling ring. The next day, she taped a notice to my gate. Emergency Oak Hollow Reserve Safety Inspection will be conducted immediately. Failure to comply may result in legal action. Legal action from an HOA that didn't legally reach my fence. I actually laughed, but something in my gut tightened, because Regina wasn't just annoying. She was the kind of dangerous that shows up with a crowd. So I did what any stubborn farmer with a target on his back would do. I prepped. I checked every camera on the property, angled one right at the gate in a wide shot, backed up my recordings, and made sure every second would be captured in crisp detail. That evening, Sheriff Grant sat on my porch, coffee in his hand, looking at the note on my gate and shaking his head. "She really wants to test the fence," he said. "Yeah," I told him, watching the sun drop behind the corn. "This time it might hit back." The next day, right around lunch, I heard them before I saw them. A low rumble building in the distance, multiple engines chewing up the dust on the road. I set my wrench down, stepped out of the barn, and there it was, a full Oak Hollow HOA patrol parade rolling straight toward my gate. 3 spotless white pickups, the Oak Hollow Reserve logo taped proudly on the doors, hazard lights blinking like it made them official vehicles, and behind the wheel of the lead truck, sunglasses on, chin up, was Regina Caldwell. They pulled up to my gate like they were serving a warrant. Neighbors started drifting toward the boundary, phones out, kids peeking from behind legs. The heat shimmered over the field, my dogs barked from the backyard, and I stood on the porch, arms folded, watching. "That lock," Regina declared, pointing like she'd spotted contraband, "is a violation of Oak Hollow access policy." "Regina," I said calmly, "this is a farm, not your clubhouse parking lot." She turned to her crew, ignoring me. "For the record," she said loudly, "the property owner has refused multiple notices. Proceed with inspection." Harold stepped forward holding bolt cutters like they were a badge. He hesitated, looking back at her. "Cut it," she snapped. The blades bit into the metal, twisted, and with a sharp crack the lock dropped into the dirt. Phones zoomed in. Dust hung in the air. Regina turned to me, triumphant. "This land is now under official Oak Hollow HOA review," she announced. "You can cooperate, or we escalate to authorities." I couldn't help it, I smiled. "Funny you say that," I murmured, because inside my barn, Sheriff Daniel Grant had just pushed his chair back. The patrol spread out like a badly trained SWAT team. Rick Morales filmed everything, narrating under his breath about unpermitted structures and unregistered vehicles. Toby Price strutted around the water tanks like he was inspecting nuclear waste. Harold marched toward the barn doors and grabbed the latch. "Locked," he called. "Then cut it," Regina ordered again. He lifted the bolt cutters, sweat beading on his forehead, and that's when the doors swung open from the inside. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. There, framed in sunlight and dust, stood Sheriff Daniel Grant, 6'2", broad shoulders filling the doorway, full county uniform on, badge catching the light, so bright you could probably see it from the highway. "Afternoon," he said, voice calm but heavy. "Mind telling me why you're cutting locks on private land? If you've never watched an HOA president's confidence evaporate in real time, let me tell you, it's something." Regina blinked behind her sunglasses. "And you are?" "Sheriff Daniel Grant, ma'am," he said, stepping out onto the packed dirt. "County law. This is Jack Mercer's property." He nodded toward me. "Unincorporated land, outside Oak Hollow Reserve jurisdiction. That fence line you just crossed, that's where your rulebook ends." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "This parcel falls within our community influence boundaries," she tried, voice flickering. "As president of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association, I'm authorized to conduct inspections for safety." He cut her off with a look. "You're authorized to hold bake sales and argue about mailbox colors. You are not authorized to break locks and storm someone's farm with a camera crew." Laughter rippled from the fence line. Harold dropped the bolt cutters. Rick lowered his phone. Toby suddenly found his shoes very interesting. I've had multiple complaints about this property, Regina pushed on, desperation creeping into her tone. Illegal construction, suspicious vehicles. From who? Sheriff Grant asked. Anyone besides you. Silence. He sighed, lifted his radio. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Grant out at the Mercer Place on County Road. I've got a group who forced entry, damaged a gate, and are refusing to leave. Send a couple of units, please. The color drained from Regina's face. You're calling backup for us? He tilted his head. You break into land that isn't yours and play pretend police in front of half the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm calling backup. Sirens started faint in the distance, that low wail floating over the fields. The entire patrol stiffened. Neighbors leaned closer against the fence, phones up higher. This weird mix of glee and disbelief on every face. Listen, Regina said, voice starting to crack. We're volunteers. This is a misunderstanding. We're just trying to protect the community. By cutting locks and trespassing? Grant asked. Ma'am, you're a homeowners association president, not federal law enforcement. And these guys, he added, pointing at the vests, the badges, the patrol decals, are a bad day away from impersonating officers. The deputies pulled up, dust swirling around their cruisers, lights flashing red and blue against my old barn. They took statements, photographed the broken lock, logged the video from my cameras. Harold muttered that he told her this was a bad idea. Rick tore off his vest and swore he was just documenting. Toby tried to melt into the background. As for Regina, she stood there with her clipboard clutched to her chest, jaw tight, eyes burning. And for the first time since she'd moved into Oak Hollow Reserve, she looked small. Here's what's going to happen, Sheriff Grant finally said. This is your formal warning. You or anyone from Oak Hollow HOA sets foot on this land again like this, we're not talking about warnings. We're talking about charges. Her voice came out thin. Understood. They left slower than they came. HOA trucks rolling away in a quiet little line behind the cruisers, the crowd breaking up in a storm of gossip and uploaded videos. Grant handed me the broken lock, grinning. Souvenir, he asked. Oh yeah, I said. That one's going on the wall. What I didn't know yet was that the bolt cutters and the gate weren't the end of Regina's story. They were the opening scene of a much bigger case. The video hit the internet before the dust settled. By the next morning, someone from Oak Hollow Reserve had posted the whole thing on Facebook. Regina ordering the lock cut, the patrol marching in, and then Sheriff Grant stepping out of my barn like some Western hero in a county-issued Stetson. The caption read, HOA president tries to raid farmer, real sheriff walks out of the barn. By noon, 30,000 views. Regina fired back with a statement on the Oak Hollow HOA page about gross miscommunication, good faith efforts, and politically motivated interference from county law enforcement, which might have sounded convincing if everyone hadn't just watched her orchestrated daylight break-in. Comments shredded her. Memes popped up. Someone made a parody page called HOA Avengers of Oak Hollow, and honestly, that one made me laugh out loud. But while the internet had its fun, Sheriff Grant and someone new were working the serious side. 2 days later, Grant showed up with a woman in a dark suit carrying a briefcase, the kind of person who doesn't waste words. She introduced herself as Special Agent Nora Briggs from the State Financial Crimes Task Force and laid out spreadsheets on my porch table like playing cards. Turns out Oak Hollow HOA wasn't just power-tripping over trash cans. They were quietly funneling big sums of money through community improvement funds that didn't actually exist, pushing resident dues into shell accounts and bogus landscaping contracts. The treasurer, Gordon Ellis, had his name all over it, and right beside his signature, on almost every authorization form, was Regina Caldwell. And that little performance she staged out here, Agent Briggs said, tapping one sheet, just gave us something we almost never get, a clear, recorded pattern of her abusing authority in public. That same week, Harold Caldwell drove up alone, no vest, no attitude, just a paper bag of biscuits and a tired look. He apologized, told me Regina had been treating the HOA like her personal government, hinted at missing money, and finally admitted he had copies of her emails and bank receipts on a flash drive. I called Grant. 20 minutes later, that drive was evidence. After that, it moved fast. One morning, I heard tires on gravel and stepped onto the porch just in time to see Regina's black SUV skid to a stop at my gate, her storming out in a hoodie and yoga pants. hair wild, shouting that I'd ruined her life, that I'd turned her husband and the neighborhood against her. I didn't even get a word in before the unmarked sedan pulled up behind her and Sheriff Grant climbed out with 2 deputies. "Regina Caldwell," he said, voice steady. "You're under investigation for financial misconduct, fraud, and falsifying records tied to Oak Hollow HOA accounts." They read her rights as the neighbors gathered one more time. Phones up again. But this time there were no vests, no clipboards, no trucks with patrol on the side. Just one woman realizing, too late, that the rules she thought she owned were finally applying to her. The cuffs clicked, the SUV door shut, and for the first time since she moved into Oak Hollow Reserve, the road in front of my farm felt clean. In the weeks that followed, the whole rotten structure came down. The state froze Oak Hollow HOA accounts. Gordon Ellis flipped and handed over more records, exposing not just our neighborhood, but a web of copy-paste HOAs across the state being used as laundromats for dirty money. Local news ran the story. HOA president at Oak Hollow Reserve pleads guilty in multi-county fraud case. There was a photo of Regina, hair undone, eyes hollow, being let out of a courthouse instead of a board meeting. Then came the envelope from the county clerk. Official notice that Oak Hollow Reserve Homeowners Association was dissolved permanently. No more board. No more dues. No more fake fines printed off a home office printer. A few months later, some of the neighbors invited me to a new kind of meeting. No bylaws, no gavel, just a voluntary council to talk about real things. Fixing a broken swing at the park, helping an older couple repaint their fence, organizing a block barbecue. When I walked into the town hall, people actually clapped. My neighbor Paula Green handed me a framed still from the viral video. Regina mid-scream at my gate, while Sheriff Grant stepped out of the barn behind her, one hand on his badge. Underneath, in bold letters, someone had printed, "Respect boundaries." We laughed, but it hit me harder than I expected. Because in the end, this whole story wasn't really about an HOA, or a gate, or a viral video. It was about what happens when one person decides their title gives them the right to cross every line in front of them, and what happens when someone else quietly decides, "Not here." Now my farm is quiet again. The gate has a new lock. The barn has that framed photo hanging over the workbench. Regina Caldwell is serving time. Oak Hollow HOA is a line in a court record, and Oak Hollow Reserve is finally just a neighborhood, not a petty kingdom. And me? Most evenings I sit on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun drop behind the fields, grateful that when chaos showed up at my gate with bolt cutters and a clipboard, the law walked out of my barn in broad daylight and simply said, "You're trespassing." So now I'm curious, if you were in my boots, standing on that porch while a power-drunk HOA president cut your lock and stormed your land, would you have let public humiliation be punishment enough, or pushed every charge as far as the law would go to make an example out of her? And when you look at people like Regina, is the real danger the fake rules they wave around, or the way the rest of us sometimes forget we're allowed to say, "No, that line is mine"?